Is there a doctor in the house?
Yes. 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 I think very deeply.
Man, Shasta, he's right here.
I think very deeply.
Dr. Brian Chad Starks.
I think very deeply.
Man, Shasta, he's right here.
4 seconds, a teacher will begin to
Dr.
speak.
Brian Chad Starks.
Oh, I'm glad y'all can stand up again. Make me earn that standing ovation. That's what I've always learned, right? Good afternoon. I would like to start off by expressing my gratitude and my thankfulness for giving this opportunity to stand before you tonight to have a very serious conversation about our responsibility as citizens here in the United States of America. Before I jump into this conversation, I would like to express some gratitude to Gerald Cheatham, President of NAACP, and his executive committee for making this decision to bring me here tonight to share with you. There was a number of different things said in that introduction, so I want to thank Ms. Maya and Nia for taking the time to actually deliver such a good introduction, as well as the talent that they've expressed. I want to acknowledge some people that are here tonight. I'm not exactly sure if they're here because I am here, but I would like to acknowledge them because I do know them. I see some of my colleagues as well as Board of Trustees from Lynchburg College, where I'm currently an assistant professor in the criminology department. I would like to also acknowledge Lynchburg City Schools, who is here, who have built a very strong relationship and working for some of the injustices that we're going to talk about tonight. I also would like to acknowledge, I'm a proud member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and at the back table, if they would please stand, those are members of the Gamma Omega Chapter of Lynchburg College of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity. There's also other members from the Pan-Atlantic Council representing Black Greeks and fraternities, so I would like to also acknowledge them and give them a round of applause as well. For more on a personal note, I would like for my grad assistant, who should be filming over here, right over here. This is Bryce Coulter. We have a brand new program at Lynchburg College of Masters in Criminal Justice, and he is my graduate assistant working with me personally. And to the left of me, I want to acknowledge my partner in crime and education, Ms. Brittany Battle. She would stand, please. And last but not least, I want to introduce my lifeline to Lynchburg City. I'm a proud father of a 22-year young lady who has done nothing but giving me an opportunity to give back some of the value systems that was instilled in me and my mother, as well as give me an opportunity to show the world that black men are great fathers. And she is an example of what our community and what we represent and what we can give and what we actually owe. And we all say that our children are the best examples of us. She is 10 times better than I ever was or I ever will be. Can you stand, Brown? Okay, I think I should professionally address some of those conversations that was being said. I know it can get confusing about exactly what type of identity I do have as a criminologist at Lynchburg College. I don't consider myself a person that really relates or recognizes itself with a title. I was fortunate enough to earn a PhD in criminology, but an assistant professor of criminology is not who Brian Chad Starks is. I am much more than what that title offers, which is why I search for problems. I search and seek out issues. I am a product of an ancestral history that did the same thing, that understood that their purpose in the world was to sacrifice and make life better for others. This is not a pedestal. This is not a pedestal. I'm just acknowledging that I am not that title of just an assistant professor. With that being said, I've been fortunate enough to work in many different disciplines, and I think it has contributed to that approach of not putting myself in a box, to only have conversations around crime. I currently am an associate director for the Delaware Space Grant, where these are funded scholarships, internships, as well as undergraduate scholarships that are funded through NASA. Right. What is a criminologist doing working with NASA? Guess what NASA is facing in this country? Injustice. Why is NASA facing injustice? There's an underrepresentation of certain populations that aren't being represented. NASA isn't okay with that. Neither is Brian Chad Starks. I was fortunate to get an opportunity during my graduate studies to introduce a different way of thinking about how to address issues that we all care about. What is an advantage of continuing segregation when the opportunity of inclusion stands before us all? I had a conversation in between basketball games as a PhD student on how I could help one of the top physicists in the country increase minority representation. And minority representation isn't just limited to the African Americans, folks. I'm talking gender. I'm talking socioeconomic status. I'm talking about those that have been alienated historically through legislation, through violence, through corruption. I'm talking about represent those people that do not have the opportunity to give their voice in the conversations where it's going to make historical or systemic change. I took the risk, as some would say, to say, hey, NASA, what you think about a criminologist trained as a sociologist coming to have a conversation with you about how you can increase your numbers? They thought something was wrong until they gave me an opportunity to have that conversation. And I moved from that space of not having an intellectual conversation on education. I moved from a space of purpose. If there is a concern, if there is a care that there is injustice, as Dr. King says, and injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, then why wouldn't I stand up for it? I'm in a PhD program. My privilege is coming. Why wouldn't I recognize that minorities have been discriminated for over 200-300 years and not afforded the same opportunities in education to put themselves on a journey of success? I'm on the journey. Some of us are on the journey. Why would I hold that captive? Why would I bottle that up? Why would I not change my pronouns from I, me, until you, until they? We, us. I took the chance. You know what they did? They bid. They gave me an opportunity. I had to go before the board to do, the dog and pony show to make sure that I wasn't going to be too proactive. But I was given the opportunity. And it worked. For the last 4 years, I've been going and listening to presentations about what we do on Mars that I have no idea what we do on Mars yet. But in the first 2 years, the most minorities and women that ever apply for fellowships and undergraduate scholarships at University of Delaware made historical numbers. Not only did the applicants make historical numbers, guess how many recipients that we had? Historical numbers. I am not taking the credit for being the only culprit to this change, but I would like to acknowledge that we all have the ability to be messengers and step outside of our comfort zones and don't let titles and certain education and degrees, money, ethnicity, gender, race, class hold you from stepping up to the face of injustice. Not only do I work with NASA, but as a graduate student, I went against the advice of my dissertation chair, and I said, how come there aren't minority representation in the faculty members at the University of Delaware? They're like, what do you mean? I said, well, the people that look like me. I said, every time I open this book, you have a conversation about crime and injustice, you're referring to me, except for you're not referring to me as the one that created the methodology to investigate whether or not who participates in criminal activity based on structural impediments. I didn't get that argument in my graduate studies. I wonder if it had anything to do with the perspective. I wonder if it had anything to do with the messenger that was having the conversation about crime and justice. Oh, so do you think that you could get some people to come in and have a conversation? I said, without a doubt. I said, there are a number of scholars in this field that are fighting for justice and aren't afraid to have these conversations that some of us define as sensitive. It's not sensitive when the prison systems are represented by 65% of the people of color. It's not sensitive when you have a 24% poverty rate in the city of Lynchburg and someone in a neighborhood, 68%, can make less than $5,000 a year. I don't understand the sensitivity of these topics. It sounds like to me that these ought to be the most topics of concern and be the first thing that a sociologist should come out his mouth with. I challenged them. They felt a little uncomfortable, but it was grounded in academic scholarship. I've been fortunate enough to be in a number of different environments along my journey of life that makes me very comfortable in spaces where others should assume that I would be uncomfortable. I have nothing to lose. I'm not the one that was in the 50s and the 60s that was standing out protesting, getting water hoses, dogs sit on them, beaten up by the brutality of excessive force and police officers. As my mother used to tell me all the time, boy, anybody can take a test. Wow. But mother, I guess you do understand that taking the test, reading the book, there is no comparison to you being 10 years old, having to lay down in the cotton field, being one of 14 children, when the school bus came by because you didn't want to be embarrassed because your father wouldn't let you go to school. Is that what you mean, Mom? That on a 100-degree day, 7 days a week from Columbia, South Carolina, it could be sweat balls. It could be tension. It's frustration. It's heavy. It's hot. But you had to get up each and every day, Mom, to go out there just to pick cotton on someone else's land to create an opportunity for economic viability. And the only thing I have to do is walk to a library, open up a book, turn off the TV, read the book, and get up in the morning to take Dr. Stark's exam. I agree with you, Mom. I agree with you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing those stories of what you went through and what you sacrificed in order for me to get the opportunity to go join the 1% fraternity in the world, and that's earning a terminal degree in education. There are no more after you get your doctorate. And I'm a product of a woman who barely graduated from high school and a father who didn't, who picked cotton every day and never dreamed what it would be like to step on a college campus. That's what the NAACP represents. That's what some of these folks in this room have represented for history. They have created, they have sacrificed, they have gone without in order for people like me, 40 years later, to stand up here before you to have a conversation that we already know we should be having every day at breakfast, we should be having every day at lunch, and we definitely need to be having it on Sundays over dinner. There's nothing novel and new that we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about it in a way, but we're going to do a different type of lens in a conversation. I want to share with you some of my personal experiences and incorporate those into more of an activist way to understand our responsibility. So the title of what I'm going to talk about tonight, in addition to what I've already said, is what do we now owe? What do we now owe? Pursuing social justice, through criminal justice and education reform. Guess what? Electing a black president didn't make it over. It's not. We're not close. We aren't. Some of us, for the story that I told, have not had the pleasure and the luxury of passing our story down to a younger generation. And this is speaking from the perspective of working in the criminal justice system, doing research and interviewing, investigating, as well as teaching and being an assistant professor in higher ed. One of the gaps that's missing is those informal methods of education that I know I was a recipient of. Something called collective efficacy is being removed from our communities. Anybody know what collective efficacy is? is that was when we wasn't afraid of our babies. Is that when we saw a baby in the neighborhood that we know was Miss Smith, we chastised that baby if he or she was doing wrong. We hugged that baby when we saw the look on their face that they needed love. We invited that baby into our house when we thought that they were hungry. But we gave off positive spiritual energy about those babies in our neighborhood. Please don't dismiss the informal education for thinking that the only education you can get is one that's offered by a higher educational institution. That's not the only conversation we're going to have tonight. Most of the conversations that I have as far as personal values and ethics, I didn't get them in the 22 years I attended anybody college. I got them from the third grade teacher that looked on my face and knew that I was coming from a home that wasn't always steady. I'm talking about the third grade teacher that knew I moved 8 times in 18 years and came to school from about 12 different homes in 1 year. I'm talking about the teacher that asked me, did your mother get the invitation for you to be in the gifted talented program? And the young man who dared not take his business to the school, he gonna protect his mama. No ma'am, that letter didn't come. She working 3 jobs. Letter came, I got the letter. She didn't have time to sign report cards. It was just like laying down on that cotton field with that mentality my grandfather gave that said that option. There is no option, it's survival. It's putting food on the table. Boy, this is how I love you. My purpose as a 10-year-old was not to bring any more strife, any more bad news to what my mother had to endure. How could I do that? Best form of education is having manners. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. I wanted her to be proud of me when she went to the laundromat, to the grocery store, when her cousins, her friends from her high school, her growing up, her community say, I saw Chad the other day, that boy got so much manners. That's all I could do. I owed that to her at the age of 10. I moved from a space of purpose that would make her proud. Just any wink in that black cloud to see a ray of sunshine is what we focused on then. Interesting now how we can get a little bit of sunshine and we won't even acknowledge it and affirm that our young kids are doing their best that they can. I'm bothered and I'm scared. I'm scared that we as a generation aren't having those type of affirmation conversations for our youth. I'm bothered and I'm scared that we are only looking at what the media portrays them as being threats. I'm bothered and I'm scared that there aren't enough young people in this room tonight as members of the NAACP. Because everything that I learned when I was growing up about activism and the purpose of African Americans was to give back. Other people you don't know, Chad, never will meet, sacrificed and did stuff for you. Guess what you need to do, ma'am? Pay it forward. What do you mean? That food on your plate? Finish it. Mom, what does that have to do? Because I worked for it. And we don't have food to waste. Some of those messages as a child you don't get until you're walking across campus at the University of Delaware and all of a sudden something hits you in the back of the head and you stumble. They're like, you tripped up. Now actually my consciousness just came up. And those goosebumps and those tears that you see, I just realized what my grandfather had to do in order to be a man in the 20s and the 30s. Raising 14 kids, having to pick cotton, taking it to the corner store, but also being cheated. My mother would say, and I should tell Dad, did you know he cheated you? So my grandfather slapped her. She began to cry. She got back to the truck, said, Daddy, why'd you slap me? She said, first of all, don't you ever disrespect me in front of another white man again. Secondly, What made you think I didn't know he was cheating me? Wow. He had to do the work, do the labor, psychologically internalize that he had to be less than in front of another man, go home and be a man, be a father, be a husband, and at the same time, face that he had to get less than in order to feed his family. Sitting in that library, in that air condition, reading that book, don't sound so bad anymore, does it? So when I started feeling sorry for myself as being the only African American in the top 10 ranked PhD program in criminology at the University of Delaware, it's like, why me? Why I'm always in these positions? I know why. Because you prepared me for it. NAACP. Not just black. Because we're talking inclusion. There were more than just African Americans fighting for social justice, doing civil rights and crime. That is not the message of this conversation. The message of this conversation is, what do we owe now? I realized and kept consciously thinking about what type of person would I have been faced with all those obstacles? Would I have been dead? For those of you that know me, I'm pretty opinionated. Very difficult to keep my mouth closed at times. So I've tried to visualize and become an Olin Quarterbum, which is my grandfather's name. Second grade education, used to clean up the floors of the body shop before he was fortunate enough to go get an opportunity to work on land, and then he brought his children to come work with him. My grandfather ended up buying the first house in a neighborhood that was predominantly white. What is it that I have to complain about for someone that has gone through such deep emotional, psychological struggles in order to make a better opportunity for Chad Starks? How many of us have had those conversations with our children? I know when Brianna was growing up, guess what I was afraid of? I was afraid if I told her about a great deal of that history, that it would bring the pain that I saw witnessed in my mother and my grandfathers and my uncles. I often wonder whether or not she would internalize it like I internalized it and question everything, religiosity included. There's no way God could have really wanted us to be the only ones to suffer. I'm confused. That didn't feel good at night, going to bed when no one could offer any answers or solutions. I didn't want Brianna to have the same. Brianna was fortunate enough to be raised as a middle to upper class young lady. But I kept her away from some of those conversations. As a parent, we don't want to instill and bring pain to our children. But how do I educate her to make her know, guess who died for you? Guess who marched for you? Guess who kept children of those that were marching? Guess who did cooking? Guess who was writing letters? Guess who was donating money? Guess who was doing the things that they could do from their position to sacrifice to make life better for me way before you even thought about it? I owed her that. I owed her that so she could instill a value system in herself, in her friends, and her classmates, that the work still has to continue. It can't stop because the pronoun is I made it. I wonder if Dr. W.B. Du Bois would have stood on his pedestal and said, I've made it, and never would have advocated, never would have put his family, himself, his identity, as well as his career on the line for somebody like me who he never even met. I owe Brianna that conversation. I owed her responsibility of knowing historically who Madam C.J. Walker is, so she can identify with someone that looks like her that did a whole lot more with less. You can't tell me that the generation now has much more technology. We have moved the needle some. There are many more opportunities and resources historically than what they have been. But what do we owe each other to continue to fight to address inequality? How many of us have had those conversations with our children that they owe starting at the age of 2, 3. My job was to get good grades and don't bring no drama home. That's a job. Lynchburg City Schools, is that not a job for our babies? That's a job. I challenge Brianna to have that job. I challenge myself to make sure I instill her with the work ethic to make her successful at the job. That's what I'm here to do tonight. I'm going to challenge you. Are we doing our jobs? Are we seeking out injustice as those that have made it to a different plateau? In 2005, I ordered, first one in my family, I ordered a 2006 Lexus LS430 that was black cherry pearl with 18-inch chrome wheels, peanut butter interior, and it had that Bluetooth system way before Bluetooth came out, right? I owned 5 homes, 4 rental properties at that time. I made over 100 grand, not much money to some of you, but I made over $100,000 for 6 years in a row getting people out of jail. 70% of those people were my friends and family members. My mother made 12 grand a year as a custodian. This was the most money me and my family had ever seen. I had one consistent drug dealer who kept me on a retainer. You don't need to stay too long, right? You need to get out. $200 a week was the agreement. He could never come into my office because he didn't have the time. So I would go see Mama, and Mama would hand me my money each week. I go this one week, and she hands me a brown paper bag. I say, yes, ma'am, thank you. I'm walking back out to the $84,000 vehicle that I got, and I shake the bag, toss it on the seat. I hit coins in it. Get to my office, give it to my office manager. I go back into my separate office. She tells me to come up front. And when I get up front, she has laid out all the money on the table. It was $37.42. It dawned on me that I was keeping him out of jail by allowing him to sell $1 or $2 hits of crack just so I could ride around in an $84,000 vehicle. I was stuck. And I kept thinking about the lessons that my mother, my grandfather, people historically, what they had sacrificed. And I said, there's no way that I was sent just to collect money from people at the most vulnerable time in the most vulnerable situation. I reached out to my older brother, who's always been a staple in my life, and I said, I can't do it no more. I said, I got the money right here for Mama if she need anything, but I can't do this anymore. It no longer felt good to me. He said, so what you gonna do? I said, I'm gonna write about it. I said, I'm gonna go get a PhD and I'm gonna change federal policies on bail. I'm gonna change the state policies on bail too. I'm gonna create a new way for us to look at those that are accused. Instead of calling them defendants, we're gonna make it accusations. I'm gonna create a theory. I'm gonna be the best criminologist ever. High expectations, high aspirations. Yes, I do have them. Why wouldn't I? From what others have sacrificed to give me the opportunity to be in the position where I was, apparently the methodology works. 7 months later, I closed my bail bonding company. Got accepted to the University of Delaware and entered the program as the only African-American male in the PhD program in criminology. I had to leave South Carolina, leave my lifeline, because I knew 10, 15, 20 years down the road, guess what my purpose was going to be about? Social justice. I'm an advocate for education. I earned a PhD. I got some of the best training in the world because I decided to leave my family, leave the money, and go seek injustice out. That move has afforded me opportunities like this to be in the room and be in the community in 14 months and be accepted and making trips to City Hall, conversation with city councilmen, city council women, the blessing of being able to meet with superintendents, mayors, black medical doctors, black attorneys. I think that sacrifice that I always reference and refer to about what others have sacrificed for us, the light came on for me. I know what I owe. And it wasn't about riding around in an $84,000 vehicle that I eventually turned in. I still think Equifax is looking for some more credit for me for paying some money, but that's another conversation. I'm not doing this to be braggadocious about the decisions that I made. I came here to share with you tonight something that I don't usually and often comfortable with doing. But I do it from a sense of urgency. I do it from a sense of urgency and accountability. Right now, we have more people of color, and especially black men, incarcerated in this country than there were black men doing slavery, enslaved. And that's a quote from Michelle Alexander's book about the new Jim Crow. And we didn't come to talk about different legislations and black codes and Jim Crows and segregation ideology. We came to talk about how that history that we often do not want to claim and own, how that is affecting our youth today. And we got to take accountability for not sharing what that struggle was about, as well as what they owe to prevent us from continuing the same type of struggle. That's what we came. That's the conversation that we have to. Education. How many of us go to the barbershop? What type of education and information sessions do you have in the barbershops? I miss those barbershops. I miss those surrogate fathers for our young black men that are misfortunate to be victims of mass incarceration that has removed so many fathers, black, Hispanic, uncles, mentors, away from our community and left women to serve more roles than they possibly can, doing the best that they can, but it takes two. Those are legislative policies of mandatory sentencing from the war on drugs that has decimated, devastated our communities. That can't be okay with us because we get to ride in $84,000 cars now. Because some of us aren't restrained and constrained to mediocre positions in the plant anymore. That has to be our responsibility to acknowledge something is wrong with this picture. Can they all be that bad? Even if they are, then serve them up to be housed, warehoused, their identities removed from them, where they've been given numbers, and that's how they psychologically refer to themselves, where their identity is totally lost. You know 80% of the people that are incarcerated coming home, right? I don't want any of us to be victims of that broken structure of unaccountability. Everybody that's an activist or fighting for social justice isn't on the front line. Everyone can't march. Everyone can't be the same type of cheerleader. We all can move our needle from the space that we are currently in just a little bit. Our teachers, our pastors, our college professors, our law enforcement, our judges, our attorneys, our mothers, our plant workers. If we just move the needle just a little bit towards justice, how do you think this would look? I'm one here to say and to advocate that I guarantee you, city of Lynchburg will look the same in the next 5 years. Oh, by the way, that is one of my goals. To have the city looking totally different in the next 5 years. For those of you that are in the positions, yes, I will be calling upon you to advocate for more social justice. So we will be having that opportunity to tell me no or engage in some constructive conversations. What do we owe? What are some suggestions that we can take from this conversation tonight? Know the history. Know the history and pass it on. I had a class this morning, but 10 graduate students, all practitioners in the field, except for Bryce as the research assistant. And we had a conversation about structural impediments. And of course, my mind was in go speak to at the NAACP Banquet, so I shared some personal stories with them this morning, and they circumvented my conversation again to say, hey, don't you think that your success is a product of your decision making? And I said no, because you don't see the bad decisions that I made and how blessed I was that they didn't have me ended up in another position. Some of us would like to only talk about the end result of where we are now, and we are misleading our babies that they can't make mistakes. Trust that those babies are smart enough that if you give them the foundation of a lens, which means that you can have an honest conversation of good and bad, that they'll make the right decisions. We don't have to manipulate information and hide stuff because you made a negative choice at the age of 17, but you're still a college professor now. Wouldn't that instill some justice in their heart to say, so there's still an opportunity for me. I'm not going to let this one situation define me. But society says that's what we should. Our criminal justice says that one decision that you make right now could define you for the next 30 and 40 years. The scarlet F is what I call it. How many times do you want those incarcerated to pay for a bad decision? How many times? How often can we have the same conversation of, should I take him to see his father behind the wall? I do work in prisons, and guess where I've had the most intellectual conversations in my life? Oh my God, we're locking up so many brilliant minds of decisions that was made 30 and 40 years ago that can't sit with us to expect that this is the way it was intended to be. I need your voice. 1995, I believe, 13 new prisons have sprouted up in the state of Virginia. Crime rates are down, but incarceration is up. If people commit less crime, why are we still building prisons? Virginia leads the state, the country, in sending kids to cops and the courts. Does anyone know what that really means on the ground? 58% of the crimes committed, did the research for the state of Delaware. If the kids who committed these crimes in the community, they're not even criminal. But somehow or another, a place that cultivates the experience that historically we fought for integration to gain access to resources, to have the books, to have the seats that others had. Now we've turned this in the last 60 years to be a place where our kids can be handcuffed and marched off to detention centers. That can't be okay with anybody in the room. Can we all be that bad to where we need police in schools? Think about it. What has happened so drastically to the youth, these youth, that they've been incarcerated and arrested for offenses that aren't even violating the criminal codes of the state of Virginia? I need your voice. I need your help. These are injustices that we all can participate in. How? I'm a mama. PTA. Have these conversations with your babies. Daddies, talk. It's not just about employment. It's not just about the teachers. It's not just about the principals. From the space that you occupy, what can you do? What do you owe to perpetuate that there is hope for the future tomorrow? Remember, a lot of people did it for you. What do we owe now? Thank you.
What an awesome speech by, we were blessed to have them. Thank you so much for sharing that story. sharing that vision.